just society would simply consist on the meritocratic competition up the ladder to success. That idea actually is not an alternative to inequality. If you think about it, it's a justification for inequality.
So the farm was my escape to be with animals, for them to treat me like I was nothing, to tell me that I was but one dot in the larger scheme of life.
Pakistan's history has evolved. There were very specific limitations and circumstances that in which one thing led to another. And that's how I read it or choose to read it.
We're absolutely delighted to be able to present a new season of JLF at New York in association with Asia Society, New York. We have lined up for you some wonderful ideas and themes and speakers, and I do hope that these will fire your imagination, your mind. On behalf of Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, and all my colleagues at Teamwork Arts, welcome back to the first edition of JLF's New York 2021 Virtual Festival. Our first session of the day is What Happens in Kabul Doesn't Often Stay in Kabul. Mariam Wardak, Hussein Haqqani, Qais Muafaq, and Kenneth I. Juster in conversation with TCA Raghavan. The rapid transition in Kabul raises new questions about US power, competence, and credibility. There are also questions on whether radical Islam has now received its most potent booster shot yet, or whether the Afghanistan drama is unique to it and an outcome of a specific history and circumstance. A session which examines the ripple effects of the swift changes in Afghanistan and the changing notions of being an American ally. Mariam Wardak MSW is the founder of Her Afghanistan, an organization that supports women in technical fields to advance in their professional careers. Her Afghanistan is among 10 organizations she has helped establish and grow. She is known for her activism and was the first public figure to call out the Ghani administration for corruption and harassment of women. Wardak has also served in both Karzai and Ghani administrations as an advisor to multiple institutions. Hussein Haqqani served as Pakistan's ambassador to the United States from 2008 to 2011 and is widely credited with managing a very difficult partnership during a critical phase in the global war on terrorism. Considered an expert on radical Islamist movements, he's currently director for South and Central Asia at Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C. Haqqani has been a journalist, academic, and diplomat, in addition to serving as advisor to 4 Pakistani prime ministers, including the late Benazir Bhutto. He received Hilal-e-Imtiyaz, one of Pakistan's highest civilian honors for public service. Qais Muafaq was born in Kabul, Afghanistan. At the age of 7, he saw the Taliban government take control of Afghanistan. He later worked as an announcer with the National Radio and Television of Afghanistan and as a producer with Shamshad Television, the country's first private TV channel. In 2010, he became the senior director of Nigaha International News. Since then, he has served as a producer, anchor, and senior director for political programs, and most recently served as a senior advisor to the upper house of Afghanistan. A month and a half ago, he sought refuge in India. Kenneth I. Juster recently completed his service as the 25th United States Ambassador to the Republic of India, 2017 to 2021. He is currently senior counselor at the law firms Freshfields, Brookhouse, Deringer, LLP, senior advisor at the institutional investor CDPQ, strategic advisor at the software company Salesforce, and distinguished fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. TCA Raghavan is a former High Commissioner. TCA Raghavan is a former High Commissioner to Pakistan from the Government of India and the Ministry of External Affairs. Ambassador Raghavan is the author of attended Lords, Bairam Khan and Abdul Rahim Courtiers and Poets in Mughal India, The People Next Door, The Curious History of India's Relation with Pakistan, and History Men, Jaudunath Sarkar, G.S. Sardesai, Raghubar Singh, and Their Quest for India's Past. The conversation will be followed by a question and answer session, so please feel free to send in your questions by typing it into the comments section below. Do also follow our social media handles to get notifications on the upcoming sessions. In these difficult times, we have struggled to bring you JLF New York 2021 as we have all our many festivals without charging a registration fee. Please do consider supporting us as generously as you can to ensure a free, seamless, and continuous flow of knowledge and information. Simply click on the Support JLF option button on the right-hand side of your screen. We really appreciate your contribution. Ladies and gentlemen, what happens in Kabul doesn't stay in Kabul. Mariam Wardak, Hussein Haqqani, Qais Muafaq, and Kenneth I. Juster in conversation with TCA Raghavan. Ambassador Raghavan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sanjay, and thank you, JLF. Thank you, Namita Bhandare and William Dalrymple for inviting me to discuss Kabul and Afghanistan with this very distinguished panel. It is now a little over 2 months since we saw very dramatic developments in Kabul and the re-entry of the Taliban.
I certainly agree with the proposition that was put forward that what goes on in Kabul doesn't stay in Kabul. And if you look at the stated reason for the United States withdrawing, it was to focus on other challenges in the region and to turn its attention and resources toward them. I think the mistake, though, is that they didn't fully appreciate that the withdrawal from Afghanistan has made these challenges more difficult. That said, I think we have to distinguish between the perception that flows out of the withdrawal and the reality. The perception, and it's been fed by propaganda from China and Russia, is that the US is an ineffective military force, that it's not a reliable or credible ally, and that it's, quite frankly, incompetent. While I disagreed with the decision to withdraw by 2 administrations, and I thought we should have continued a residual force of air support, intelligence, and logistics support to manage the situation there and hold off the Taliban, reasonable people can certainly disagree about that decision. But under any circumstances, the chaotic withdrawal was highly regrettable, and it certainly has both short-term and potentially long-term reputational damage to the United States and to US credibility. In my view, I think the damage will likely only be in the short term based on certain clear realities. The fact remains that the United States was in Afghanistan for 20 years. During that time, we spent $2.3 trillion, and more than 2,400 American soldiers lost their lives. I can't recall in my lifetime any similar commitment by one country to another, especially one halfway around the world. So I think that speaks volumes. At some point, the United States was going to have to leave. But we have to remember that the United States, in my view, still remains the most powerful country in the world in terms of its military strength and its economic resources. And I believe, despite the propaganda, that serious people in Beijing and Moscow and elsewhere understand this reality and realize that the United States is not going away. But the burden does remain on the United States to reverse the short-term perceptions that I referred to earlier and that you referred to, Sanjay, in your title and discussion of this panel. Already, I believe there have been some positive signs about reversing this perception. Shortly after it, the United States announced an enhanced defense relationship with Australia and the United Kingdom, what's known as AUKUS, to provide technology for nuclear submarines to Australia. This was a very strong commitment and message. The US also convened the first in-person summit of the quadrilateral grouping of Australia, India, Japan, and the United States, with a very broad and positive agenda for the Indo-Pacific. And so these are important signals that the United States is in fact going to commit more time and resources to the Indo-Pacific. I think the real test of the impact of the withdrawal from Afghanistan may well be what China does with Taiwan. As you know, the Chinese have been taking steps to try to intimidate the people in Taiwan and to pull about a unification between Taiwan and the mainland. That's certainly their objective. The question is whether they'll be emboldened by the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, or do they still appreciate some of the realities I mentioned in terms of US military and economic strength, and whether they believe the United States has the will to utilize that strength. From my perspective, the United States needs to clarify its intentions with regard to Taiwan and the actions it will take to stand behind those intentions. It needs to coordinate with its allies in Europe and Asia to make the Chinese aware of the costs that they would incur if they aggressively took action against Taiwan. But it must be understood that if the United States allows China to forcibly take Taiwan and to absorb it into the mainland, then in reality, that really would be a serious undermining of the US alliance and partner relationship in the region. So again, in sum, while the situation in Afghanistan is very difficult, and I know we're going to hear about that from other speakers on the panel, and the process of withdrawing was chaotic, highly regrettable, and damaging in the short term to the US reputation as an ally. I think if you look at the realities of our 20-year presence in Afghanistan, of our overall force, and of our recommitment to the Indo-Pacific region, these concerns are short-term perceptions and hopefully will not be long-term.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for that perspective on the United States. And certainly what you said has nobody can disagree with it. I read somewhere that the United States in real terms put more treasure into Afghanistan than it did into Europe during the martial law period. And that is a staggering amount of money. But my question really now is to Qais Muwafiq about how would you as an Afghan look at this? And while certainly it is true that the United States was in Afghanistan for 20 years, but with the re-entry of the Taliban and the very, very significant changes which have taken place, how much is there left of those 20 years, and how much of that 20-year investment, not just in terms of what comes up in roads and buildings and hard infrastructure, but in terms of investment in the people and in institutions, how much of it is going to be of enduring value as Afghanistan looks ahead?
With respect to you and all of the guests in this panel, thanks for inviting me at the start. Let me go back at a glance to 20 years ago while US came to Afghanistan. You just think while US attacked after 11 September in Afghanistan, there was no permission by Afghanistan people and anyone else, but they came there just because of a treat, which was Al-Qaeda at that time. Even, the thing happened that in 20 days, Taliban government collapsed and a new government came and we start from zero. They build everything, they will stay with us. Before your guest have told that there was about 2,000 to 3,000 US troops have been killed in Afghanistan war, but we should note one thing, that 150,000 Afghans from army, from civil society, from general people, they also lose their lives in this friendship with US. It means in compare of 2,000 to 3,000 Americans, we lost 150,000 Afghan lives in last 20 years in Afghanistan. And we stand, we fight on behalf of all around the world with insurgency, with Taliban, with terrorists. See, the thing and the reason of collapse of Kabul is very simple. US leave us in half of the way, and they speedily, first of all, Ambassador Khalilzad, the one that yesterday resigned his position, he highlighted the name of Taliban. They were completely weak. Only Taliban had support of Pakistan, Russia, and some other neighbor countries, because these countries in the region, they were afraid that US is going to bring Taliban in Afghanistan and there will be a threat and security problem for the region. Due to that, and also due to ever support that we have ever complained in many conferences of the world, even I was, as a journalist in Second Bonn in Germany, I was in Chicago conference, and I participated in more than 50 conferences in more than 50 countries. We complained and raised the sound for everyone that Pakistan is supporting them. Our neighbors have connection with the Taliban. US have to put pressure on them. There should be sanctions. No one hear from us. Ambassador Khalilzad and Doha, they give an office for the people that they were in mountain, they don't have power. They highlight the name in social media and they decrease the morale of Afghan army. And after that, there was no good end and management for this peace process which was happening on that time. Finally, we didn't lose anything in war. We politically collapsed. One thing was the government of Afghanistan mistakes, and everything was competition of Ambassador Khalilzad with President Ghani, because they had problem from the time that they both were in American university in Beirut on that time. And later on, Khalilzad had desire to become president of Afghanistan post Karzai period. And Ghani, just because that he and his corrupted team, which was triangle of three doctors, Mohib, Fazli, and Ghani, these people wanted to remain in the power, and from other sides, mismanagement of Ambassador Khalilzad and some other people, it led the things that today we lose everything in Afghanistan. And even you say that US withdrawal was not something that we blame US on that. Everyone from Congress, from Pentagon, from Department of State, every scholar, and even if you go and do a referendum in United States of America, general public is also against the withdrawal which was happening. The thing I want to finish together all the things in subject of radical Islam and the thing which is happening, even you people know that some Islamic countries and governments, they, with a tyranny on of the people, they didn't even respect the human rights, the woman rights, nothing, but international community not interface. And they support that kind of countries. And this was the reason that this radical Islam, and you see yesterday, Mr. Haqqani is praising the people for the suicide, which is not even allowed in any religion of the world. It was the reason that they inject the ideology of radical Islam to entire region, and you see it in Europe and some other countries of the world. Now, if we have a conclusion of all, the thing is that US leave us in half of the way, is speedy withdrawal, and even the mismanagement of them with the signing agreement with the Taliban, and even today Taliban is not accepting even one line of that agreement. Now the question is going to all those CIA senior officials, ambassadors, like example the army seniors of US, they were present in Afghanistan, that what kind of policy it was. You people bring Taliban in 2 days. From other point of view, they highlight the things they told that they have told before that the reason is that Afghanistan government will fight with Taliban for 1 year. Later on, another research from CIA, they told the Afghanistan government will collapse in 90 days. Now you see from one side, they did not support the Afghan army to fight. From other side, all of our senior army commandants that they had passed in UK and US, and half of them was trained by the US and United States of America. They was in position of fighting against Taliban. All those people with the national security advisor that from where he came and where he is right now, they all become together. They did not fight with the Taliban, and due to mismanagement, they collapsed a government that had every infrastructure from A to Z, and a brave and champion Afghan army that they had casualty of more than 50,000 in last 20 years and fighting with insurgency and with Taliban. It is all the reason that we come together, that today we see what is going on in the ground. And what is happening today in Kabul, an entire province of Afghanistan, still we are shouting on of international community that the time it will be too late for going back and have interface in this government, which is only Taliban, and even they have problem with each other. Haqqani group is hearing from ISI, the Kandahari Taliban, they are also half of them root is in ISI.
We'll come back to that, guys, when we come to Hussein Haqqani, because I think what you're saying about the Pakistani role is certainly very significant, and there is a large measure of agreement, as I think Ken also said, about how the end game, or in fact even the middle game, was completely mismanaged over 2 administrations. But may I turn to Mariam Wardak and ask the same question about what was the enduring value of the last 20 years, given how things have shaped out, and what happened today, for instance, with regard to the suicide bombers being honored, which Kais referred to. What is the enduring, what is going to remain of those 20 years?
Well, first, I would like to express how honored I am to share this space with such esteemed colleagues. If you could give me a few minutes, because I would like to present a gentle reorientation of the war on terror. It seems that Afghans were deemed as disposable enough to be used. And it started from the Soviet war, leading to the Civil War because it was global in nature. And then the last 20 years and what's happening now. In the last 20 years of war, the Afghans faced, it wasn't only 20 years, it was 40 plus years. And it seems the discussion around Afghanistan has been focused on the democratization of Afghanistan, but I must critique this and state that a war was taking place amongst Afghans. Attempts to normalize the war in a narrative of democracy or building is wrong, and it is an insult to all the foreign and national lives that we have lost in Afghanistan. We have to reset the timeline and re-examine what has taken place to carefully articulate and craft our next moves regarding Afghanistan. I'm disappointed in how international actors have erased and minimized their role in what has taken place with Afghanistan. Oftentimes, I've mentioned that the withdrawal of forces will bring an end to diplomatic relations and an end to financial support, which is what has taken place. The responsibility of the hunger wave that's taken place in Afghanistan falls on the international actors. The economy of Afghanistan was 99% driven by donors. It was a donor economy, not Afghanistan's economy. The unemployment rate right now, the chaos and the mismanagement that is inappropriately blamed on the new regime should not be acceptable, and those actors that mismanaged their withdrawal should be highlighted. The United States aid organizations, diplomats, military, our regional actors, European and UK allies, and international organizations such as the United Nations and European Union, insignificant actions caused Afghanistan's circumstances today. If we cannot hold their irresponsible manner and engagement accountable, how could we put pressure on the Islamic Emirates? What these actors have paved is the path for the Taliban to either now be forced to re-enter the drug industry, which will ultimately lead to a possible terrorist activities, because drugs and criminal activity, including terrorism, go hand in hand. Let's reflect the Afghanistan papers, how the architects of the war did not know what they were doing, devastated the Afghans through drones, violence, an immigration wave, and much more. We also cannot turn away from the incompetent embedded actors that President Ghani has empowered that centered the massive corruption. They dominated the false narrative, caused further fractions amongst ethnicities in the country, and financially benefited from the suffering and conflict of Afghans. It seems that as observers and actors in Afghanistan, we are shocked by the Taliban's rise to power, but we are not shocked by the political violence the international actors' presence had committed. Now, the Islamic Emirates are responsible for 35 million plus citizens. What should be done? That's the kind of narrative I want to focus on. We should not fail the citizens by continuing Afghanistan in a humanitarian crisis, the hunger wave, unfreezing the money. The country cannot have an electricity outage because of payment issues. In addition to the hunger wave, this also reflects the massive corruption acts by the leaders in the last administration. Unfreezing the money will also contribute to the functional education sector, because Ministry of Education only operated through donor aid. But the demand that the international actors can have is to represent females in the sector, such as teachers and students. Yes, a few schools have reopened in Afghanistan, but we need a massive focus on educating the public and keep their focus on growth rather than leading to powerlessness, because that's what will be used as the foundation of terrorism, powerlessness. I think we all should demand international actors to present women-only delegations to communicate with the Taliban, to play and echo the demand of female representations, because all the discussions that are taking place in Afghanistan are purely male-dominated. I've also created a compelling argument of demanding female Islamic scholars to communicate in the language that the Islamic Emirates has used, which is religion, Islam. We have to educate them on how important it is to permit Afghan women as leading society actors. Now, lastly, I really want us to focus on one major aspect, is that all of the aid and support that is going to enter into Afghanistan is entering through UN, ICRC, and other international-led actors. This is wrong, because you are creating dependency on international organizations by the Afghans again. There also needs to be a responsibility of how immature the actions of the UN has been, the delayed response for the Afghan call to help, and the lack of the US vision in how to engage with the Taliban. The main actor that supported the rise of the Islamic Emirates cannot be silent. The United States needs to pave a path for all of us to be able to engage with Afghanistan, due to the fact that they are known as UN designated terrorists. The assistance and how to move forward all relies on United States. Now, in regards to what's happening in Afghanistan, we are all devastated, but we can't stay in the focus of devastation, and we need to move forward. Now, paving what recommendations I have, it is a due responsibility for us to continue to hold Afghans to support their own society. We cannot be focused on the calamity. We need to focus on how to make sure that their morale is built and functioning the society. That's all I have for right now. And if there's any questions, I would love to.
Thank you very much, Mariam. And I will put the points which, as I understood them, to Hussein Haqqani. And Ambassador Haqqani, would you also agree that now really the way forward is engagement with the Taliban as a means of engaging with the Afghanistan people? And really what depends, what is important is the quality and the texture of the engagement, as Mariam brought out. But also the other point she made, that why blame the Taliban when the Western allies and the major donors and many in the Afghan government themselves got it so wrong. So if I extend that logic further, why blame the Taliban and why blame the Pakistanis for that matter? They were only doing what they always said they were doing, which is that they wanted the Taliban back in the corridors of power in Kabul.
Let me just say that I have no intention of getting into the discussion about blame. The fact of the matter is that the Taliban are who they are, and they have got control of Afghanistan. And they did so with the help of Pakistan. And they did so because of a total failure on the part of the United States to understand or at least do anything about it, even when they understood it. The US never had a 20-year plan for Afghanistan that kept it in Afghanistan for 20 years. It had 21-year plans because of the very ad hoc nature of its engagement there. What they built in infrastructure may be significant, but in terms of institutions, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court probably is in India now. Many members of the parliament are either in Pakistan, in Turkey, or in the United Arab Emirates. All the productive members of Afghan society are itching to get out of Afghanistan. The Taliban are not a group that is equipped to run a country. They simply are not. They are an ideological movement fueled with suicide bombing, with terrorism, and an ideology of anger and hate. Not taking that ideology seriously is one of the reasons why we are where we are. For example, it takes 30 years for a second lieutenant to become a general in any other country. But in Afghanistan, the Afghan National Forces were expected to be raised within a few years. The US has been talking about leaving Afghanistan for the last 11 years. How can you succeed in building up an army and an effective government when you are constantly talking about leaving? So the US has made significant contribution to Afghanistan, but the manner in which it's left, basically whatever that contribution was, seems to be going down the drain right now. As far as the Taliban being recognized and accepted is concerned, I don't think that's going to happen very fast. It's a nice thing. The word engagement is a favorite phrase for diplomats. But you always have to think about who you are engaging with. In fact, I think that the biggest mistake in Afghanistan, among other mistakes, was this notion of engaging with the Taliban. And I wrote about it way back in the New York Times, an article which you can easily, everyone should Google it. It's very simple. It's called "Don't Talk to the Taliban." And it was in 2012, soon after I resigned as ambassador, and when I knew that the Obama administration was trying to reach out to the Taliban. The reason for that is that when you start engaging with what is essentially an extremist terrorist movement, then you normalize it. And when you normalize it, then its backers understand that at some point, they will be able to argue that since you talk to terrorists, then why are you stopping us from talking to them and for supporting them? And so therefore, the last 10 years were in fact wasted. And then it also signaled to the Afghan elite that the Taliban could at some point come back. And therefore, people started hedging against that by stealing more money, parking it in foreign banks, buying houses abroad, etc. What is the extent of the Taliban's ideology? I want the audience to remember that the current Amir of the Taliban, who hasn't yet made a public appearance, Mullah Hebatullah Akhundzada, blessed his son, think about it, his son to become a suicide bomber. And the son died in a suicide bombing. And the Taliban praised that. So how can such a movement have the same aspirations and same ambitions as Qais Muwaffaq or Ken Justa or TCA Raghavan? It's a delusion to think that such people will think like us at some point. Their priorities are different. So they will not be able to provide governance to Afghanistan. The international community needs to figure out how to continue to provide humanitarian and other assistance to the people of Afghanistan without necessarily empowering the Taliban. So engagement with the purpose of continuing to provide that humanitarian assistance, while at the same time making it very clear that the Taliban, their way of thinking, their ideology and their belief system is not acceptable, not only to the international community, but to the majority of the Afghans. Let us be honest, the Taliban are a minority. They represent a minority point of view. And so when Mariam Wardak says that the women have to be taken into account, absolutely. And there is much more resistance this time of a peaceful nature than there has been in the past in Afghan society. So where do I see things going? I think that there will be engagement with the Taliban, but I don't think that engagement will be the same thing as legitimizing. And that will be different. That will create a new different dynamic. As far as Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan has unleashed something that will come back to bite it. I have been saying this in each one of my books. I have pointed out that Pakistan's policies are maybe successful in the short term, like getting their proxies or their supporter or the group that they supported win power in Afghanistan. But in the long term, it's a losing game. And here's why. Once the Taliban have succeeded in Afghanistan, there is no reason why the Pakistani Taliban should not take heart. And the Afghan Taliban are not going to be subordinate to Pakistan. Pakistan has always said that it has a relationship with them, but cannot control them. And now is the moment when that is going to manifest itself most. Controlling a group like the Taliban is very difficult and is going to prove even more difficult for Pakistan. So Pakistan will have a lot of problems. It will be caught between international demands for controlling the Taliban and the Taliban demands for greater autonomy in decision making. And then there will be the problem of the Pakistani Taliban striking inside Pakistan. And so can the rest of the world through engagement change the Taliban? I don't think so. I don't know if anybody remembers. People have short memories. People don't remember that even in the 1990s, the international community tried its best to try and engage with the Taliban. With the exception of India, everybody else engaged with the Taliban at one level or another, provided humanitarian assistance to the Afghan people through the UN and the World Food Programme. And yet the Taliban could not change because people's belief systems matter to them. I think that eventually the people of Afghanistan, and here I think the investment of the last 20 years will be useful. The people of Afghanistan know that there is another path for Afghanistan. The only choice for Afghans is not between unrepentant, unchanged, and unaltered Taliban and the corrupt elite that Qais and Mariam spoke about, but that Afghanistan can find a way in which Afghans can compromise, figure out how to run their affairs without the dominance of somebody else. And Afghanistan that can have good relations with its neighbors, including Pakistan, Iran, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan, but at the same, and also be part of the rest of the world. One last point I would make is
Very quickly, please.
Yeah, there is a misconception that the Taliban somehow were forced to host international extremists and terrorists in the past. The reason why they did so was because even before the Taliban, the Mujahideen had links with international jihadi groups, and it was based on common and shared ideology. And the same phenomenon will be at work now, even if the Taliban leaders sign agreements with the rest of the world and say such and such group will not be allowed in. The individual Mujahid or the individual fighter of the Taliban will feel such and such individual from such and such group is my brother in faith and struggle. And they will then protect them. And we are already seeing a lot of that happening. Lastly, the Haqqani network, which I have the unfortunate situation of sharing a last name because they have adopted it from the madrasa. They studied it in Pakistan, and they are essentially a globally acknowledged terrorist group that has no compunction in accepting that it is what it is. They still hold an American as hostage even after having engaged with the Americans in talks. I cannot see them changing. The only thing that is likely to happen is that they will eventually be dealt out of power by dynamics within Afghanistan, which may not play out in the short term, but will definitely play out over the long term.
Thank you. Thank you. We just have about 4 or 5 minutes left. So I'll ask, beginning with Ambassador Juster, to sum up in about a minute what he would now like the US to do, given what is happening and given what the other panelists just mentioned.
Well, thank you. And again, I am very moved by the presentations by the panelists and agree with much of what has been said. And there is no doubt that the manner in which the United States engaged with the Taliban and the manner in which it withdrew were extraordinarily damaging to Afghanistan and to the US image and credibility. And what I was speaking to is whether that's a lasting impact on the US perspective or not. And I thought that it could be corrected over time, but that doesn't change the terrible situation within Afghanistan. And I think the United States has committed and needs to continue to provide assistance to Afghanistan to try to ensure that any activity that emanates from Afghanistan in terms of terrorism elsewhere is put down, and to try to not recognize the current government until they see some changes on the ground, which may or may not occur. But we should not just leave and forget about the situation, even though we're not there. And I do think we are committed to providing assistance and to helping those Afghans who worked with us. But I don't deny that the way in which we left certainly has left a lot of scars and undercut a good deal of what we've done. But I don't think you can neglect the fact that we were there for a long time. We were trying to stabilize the situation. And I do think in the long term, we will have credibility as an ally and partner.
Thank you. Look, I think everyone would agree with you that the Afghan people were let down because aspirations and hopes were created, which really were never addressed very seriously. But what would you like to see happen now? And in about a minute, please, if you could tell us.
See, now whatever, if we blame Pakistan, US wrong policy and everyone, time have gone. Taliban is in Afghanistan, and unfortunately, again, I'm repeating, only few specific people from Afghanistan government and as a major player, Ambassador Khalilzad and Biden government, they play with the future of 35 million population of our country. They leave us alone. Now, the best solution is that international community should not wait for what the Taliban is going to do. Taliban will not change. They will not do anything. They will only tell lie, but they are insurgent groups, no one else. Even Haqqani network and Taliban, they are divided into groups. They are fighting between each other because of the ministries. They will not do anything, even in subject of women's rights, and even they don't like people like me, like other youths, except, how they can talk with intelligent leaders of Afghanistan that they are hidden in the homes right now in Afghanistan. They will not accept mans. Even we are not talking about leaders in this manner. Now, international community should not wait anymore that what Taliban will do. They have to interface the United Nations, the United States of America, NATO, and you have here that NATO is telling that due to pressure of US, they leave. Otherwise, NATO don't have policy to leave Afghanistan. We know that now they have to interface, they have to start that peace process, which was in Doha before. And there should be, again, another negotiation with the Taliban on which all the party sides of Afghanistan should participate on that. And the world should not they should note one thing, that if Taliban is ready to give some ministries for some other, like example, Shia people, for other political groups, it not means they have changed. Everyone should have hand in the power because minister is employee of Mullah Hassan and some other Taliban leader. They will give for some time, again, they will do their own works. They have to start the reconciliation process. International community should not hear anymore from the Taliban. They have to interface 35 million people, innocent people. They are crying every day and night. And the region countries and international community, they are just doing show off of making negotiation with the Taliban, meeting with them. It is completely wrong. It is not humanity. US should note this point. United Nations should note this point. Our region country should note this point. If they let the Taliban to go for 1 year more, there will be big crisis in the region. They will inject the ideology of terrorism in the region. There will be a lot of problems in entire country, including Pakistan. They have to interface, they have to come back, they have to start reconciliation process, they have to bring a temporary government that every Afghan see their own faces on that, and then we should go for another election under support of international community that we start infrastructure administration once again. Otherwise, no way else, nothing is possible to see for the Taliban and to wait for them what they are doing. They will not do anything else. They will only praise the suicide bombers, nothing else.
Thank you, thank you. We have a minute left. So Mariam, if you have time, if you could, you made a number of very practical suggestions, but anything else you would like to add?
I think that when we are speaking to one another, we should all be very cautious and understand that we are not trying to blame one another, and that we are just trying to be very objective about the situation, and that we should be cognizant of our suggestions and recommendations. The negative fallback of what happened in mid-August is that unfortunately we were not able to be on a united front. I think that however scary the current situation may be, we have to work with what is being dealt with us. And more importantly, I think that we need to make sure that the Afghans are not dependent on international organizations, and that aid needs to be provided to the Afghan people, and more so to unfreeze the money, so we are not put in a situation where the regional countries or international allies will be put in danger. Because if we do not unfreeze the money, I will emphasize this one more time, the Taliban will be forced to re-engage in their old ways. Like Ambassador Haqqani mentioned, there is a way, they have not changed in many ways, but they have been able to present themselves in a different manner. And that presentation is what we can use to hold them accountable, because there's no alternative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariam. And we've run out of time. But as in every discussion about Afghanistan for the past few months, we are left with more questions than answers. Thank you very much. And over to you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Ambassador Raghavan. And you're absolutely right. I mean, Afghanistan, there's no easy solutions. We do hope to continue these conversations to be able to bring together some sense of what is possible. So Mariam Wardak, Hussain Haqqani, Qais Muwaffaq, Kenneth I. Juster, and T.C. Raghavan, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on what's possible in Afghanistan. Thank you all for watching, and we encourage you to buy the books of our speakers that are available at our official bookstore. And if you've liked the session, do consider supporting us through the Support JLF option button on the right-hand side of your screen. Once again, we'd like to thank all our partners, and do tune in for the upcoming session, Nandana Dev Sen in conversation about Acrobat. And that's at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time, 1 p.m. Central Time, and 11 a.m. Pacific Time, and 12 p.m. Mountain Time. Till then, stay tuned, stay safe.
What's up, universe? Why this curse? What's your beef with me? Why don't you just let me be? Always going for the jugular, making suffering my new regular, throwing one punch after the other, each one harder than the other. Boom comes your sucker punch, knocking me out without a hunch. Always hitting below the belt. How do I make you melt? Why are the gloves always off? Why this constant need to knock me off? Why make me your punching bag? Why the disability tag? Haven't you had enough? Hasn't it been rough enough? What's up, universe? Why this curse? Hi, my name is Arushi Loya, and I have been at loggerheads with the universe for the past 9 years since I got diagnosed with an incurable chronic pain condition called fibromyalgia. It took an outgoing, fun loving, travel loving girl who was doing exceedingly well in her career and trapped her within the four walls of her own house. A slave of my own body, don't have any say. No longer the life of the party. Fibromyalgia left me astray, saddled with this invisible disability. Had to change my personality. With limited physical mobility, pain reduced my sociability. Ambition had to be locked away. A constant price I continue to pay. Living with fibromyalgia is a huge struggle. I am in pain 24/7. I have not been able to sit for the past 9 years and I can barely stand. I am almost rendered immobile and bedridden. Yet, every single day, I fight this monster with all that I have in hope of some miracle to happen. Just one day, I want to wake up with a little less worry in my cup. Just one day, not be in pain. A chance to break this chain. Just one day of not monitoring every activity. A day pass from this constant captivity. Just one day of no heartbreak. Fibromyalgia also deserves a break. Just one day of feeling like my old self before I start forgetting that girl myself.
A just society would simply consist on the meritocratic competition up the ladder to success. That idea actually is not an alternative to inequality. If you think about it, it's a justification for inequality.
So the farm was my escape to be with animals, for them to treat me like I was nothing, to tell me that I was but one dot in the larger scheme of life.
Pakistan's history has evolved. There were very specific limitations and circumstances that in which one thing led to another, and that's how I read it or choose to read it.
We're absolutely delighted to be able to present a new season of JLF at New York in association with Asia Society, New York. We have lined up for you some wonderful ideas and themes and speakers, and I do hope that these will fire your imagination, your mind.